Thanks for joining us for another episode of DPC Radio. This episode was recorded live in Amsterdam at the Dutch PHP Conference 2012. For more information about the Dutch PHP Conference, visit our website, phpconference.nl.
So, everybody can hear me? Volume okay? In the back as well? Great, let's start. My name is Bastian Hofmann, and I'll talk about JavaScript mashups and some advanced techniques to create them today. What is this really about? You know, if you look back 10, 15 years, how the web was looking then, you saw websites like this. And yeah, I spared you the animated GIFs and the background music. But more seriously, you had something like Yahoo out there with their catalog and a small search box here. eBay was out. In Germany it was called Alando back then still. There were some interaction there. I had profiles and PHP 3 was out. Yay, year 2000 compatible. And the thing is, web pages then were more of a static affair. Like you had your links, static pages linked together, some forms to allow user interaction, user-generated content, but that's it. And it's a far cry from what was possible with desktop application back then. So totally different concept. Fast forward to today, we see stuff like Google Docs, Google Maps with Street View, whole IDEs happening in the browser. Something that a few years back was not possible because of speed and everything is now possible because browsers got blazingly fast, JavaScript got blazingly fast. It's not that ugly, unsecured child of the web anymore. And we see more and more applications just happening in the web. Another example is also Twitter and Lifehacker. More traditional websites are adopting the same techniques, a whole lot of JavaScript, client-side rendering, to make their applications faster and seemingly faster because you only have to transport JSON with your server and to the client, just to enhance the usability of the pages. And if we take this whole concept one step further, we land at something like this, Chrome OS, Chrome Web Store, and also Mozilla is building something like this, which also transports a notion of an application, of an app, like it's on mobile devices, like it's on the desktop, to the browser, to the web. And also, many web applications don't rely on their own data solely anymore. Like they're getting data from Facebook, from the Graph API with Facebook Connect. They're adding tweet buttons. They're adding Google Maps. They're adding YouTube videos, SoundCloud widgets, and everything. And this also poses some problems with security, some problems with design. And in the end, this is one I want to talk about today. So how to create a JavaScript-based application for the web and include external content into it. So just a bit of buzzwords. We will see in the next 45 minutes how to create basic JavaScript applications. We'll talk about OAuth 2 and cross-origin resource sharing, about local storage, OEmbed, so embedding external stuff, real-time updates with WebSockets, activity streams, PubSub, PubUp, and also a small outlook in the end of how the web platform may evolve in the future. Before we begin with that, a few words about me. I work at ResearchGate. This is a social network for scientists and researchers. We have at the moment over 1.5, I think it's over 1.7 million users at the moment, which is quite good for such a niche market. This is what our profile page looks like. And of course, like every other web company, we are hiring. So if you want to work at an international startup in Berlin on very sophisticated stuff and in a startup that is well-funded and may have the possibility to change the world of science, talk to me later. Also, in my spare time, I contribute as a committer and PMC to the Apache Shindig project, which is an open social container, just for information. And I, as I told you, work and live in Berlin, a city worth visiting. If you have any questions in between, if you don't understand something I tell you, I know I have an accent. If you can't read something on the slides or in the demos later on, just raise your hands. And if you don't understand something, raise your hands. We have plenty of time for that in between. And it's not your fault if you don't understand something, probably mine because I didn't explain it well enough. The slides will be available on Speaker Deck later on, and I also will link them on Joined In, so you don't have to write stuff from the slides down. You can check it out later on. Also, let's write a JavaScript application, and I always, when doing tech talks, I like code, because I'm a programmer. So this will be a bit code heavy, so you'll see lots of JavaScript code, and just that I know where you're coming from, raise of hands, who does JavaScript on a daily or basis or something? Great. And the others are doing PHP or, PHP. Okay, cool. You should have no problems following that. The code will be available on GitHub after the talk, or it's available there already. So also you can check it out, revisit it, reread the code, because at some points I won't cover every detail, because it would get too exhausted and I would need 2 hours for that. I focus on the important parts. So the first thing was writing an application, and some point I want to highlight is I'm a backend developer. I can do JavaScript, I like JavaScript, but when it comes to front end, and with front end I mean CSS, this is my relation with CSS. I have total respect for everybody who can handle CSS and all these browser complications with IE and everything, but I'm not one of them. So I use Bootstrap or use other CSS frameworks. It's really worth it to make your pages and your applications look nice. And of course, you should skin them a bit so that it not looks like bare-bone Bootstrap. When we write JavaScript applications, we still have to keep in mind that the application still runs in the browser. And in the last 15 years, we educated people that 2 things are always possible in the browser. You can go back to the state of the application you were before, with the back button in the browser, and you can bookmark a page, a website. Okay, people don't use bookmarks if they are not techies, but they are used to being able to copy the URL out of the address bar, paste it into an email, send the email to somebody else, and somebody else should see the exact same state of the application the sender saw, if there is no problems with security and login and so on, of course. With JavaScript applications, this is kind of a problem because they usually work like this. You have a backend that renders out a bit of bare HTML and a whole lot of JavaScript, and a whole lot of JavaScript then makes some AJAX request, manipulates the DOM, and you have a very cool application, but you don't have any change of state in the browser automatically. Usually, with JavaScript applications, what you do then is manipulate the fragment part of the URL every time you have an application state change, because this is something you can access all the time in every browser, even in IE6. And then if the application starts, you look if there is a fragment in the URL, and then move your application to this state accordingly. With HTML5 capable browsers, it's also possible to change the whole URL. The thing is, you don't really want to do this by hand. Has ever anyone done this by hand? Application state changes with fragments in a JavaScript application? 1, 2, 3, yeah, few. It's not fun. Or for me, it wasn't fun doing this. So use frameworks. There are a whole lot of JavaScript frameworks out there, for example, Barebone, and YUI has also, I think, a routing layer. jQuery does hopefully something like this. For this demo, I chose something small called SemiJets, because there are some other nice features, but it's not it's the best, it's probably not. For small applications, it's quite nice. Next, we want to get data from some third parties, from somewhere else. For example, in this demo, I'll use data from StatusNET. StatusNET is an open source microblogging platform. I chose StatusNET because I can just install it on my laptop. So it's like Twitter, just open source. I can install it on my laptop in case the Wi-Fi is not that good, which is good for a presentation. But the same demo would work with Twitter as well. Problem with API access from our JavaScript application is the same origin policy of the browser. The same origin policy says that you only can access stuff that is on the same domain as your application. So if your application is at client.net and you want to access something at status.net or twitter.com, it's not possible. It's actually a good thing, because otherwise you could sniff like cookies and everything from all the pages the user currently has open in their browser. So the same origin policy is important. But for API access, it's kind of bad for us because accessing API, we are pretty sure that API provider won't send any cookies or something with this API response. And it's a valid thing to access an API. Fortunately, there are ways around this. One is called JSONP. It works in every browser, but it's a bit hacky if you don't use a framework for that. Or even nicer is something called cross-origin resource sharing, which is available even in IE 8 and up, I think, and even will be available in Opera 12 and all the other browsers. Cross-origin resource sharing works like this. When our client application in the browser at client.net wants to make an AJAX request to an external domain, the browser makes an options request to this host and looks in the response for this header, access control allow origin. And if the value of this header matches the domain, so the asterisk will match everything, then the AJAX request is executed. And we'll use this in the demo as well. Next, before we start with code and everything, in JavaScript applications, you oftentimes see something like this. You have some data here you got somewhere, you're iterating over this data, you're concatenating this together into a string, and then put it in some DOM element. This is bad in so many levels. First of all, can anybody see the error? Yeah, but my ID could be with a hashtag. Yeah, right. This is actually the moment I would, yeah, here it is. I forgot to close the URL. This is actually the moment I would hand out a small prize, but unfortunately my luggage got stuck somewhere between Berlin, Frankfurt, and Amsterdam. So no prize for you, unfortunately. Yeah. I actually missed this closing URL tag, and it's actually quite easy to miss something like this because you don't have any structure in your HTML in here. You don't have any IDE support, any highlighting. Also, if your application grows bigger and bigger, and you have a whole lot of this code, and at the end, some months later, you want to change your markup. You want to add maybe the class here. It's very hard to find where actually your markup is built. And we are forgetting everything we learned with server-side programming. There we have MVC frameworks. We're using templates. We are using view and controller separation and everything. This is all mixed together here. So don't do this. Instead, use templates, a very, very new concept. No. There are many templating languages and frameworks available for JavaScript as well. Just pick something, handlebars or Mustache. I chose Mustache for this demo because it works very well together with Semi.js. And yeah, let's see what I built. Okay. So, readable by anybody? I guess so. So, what I have at the beginning is just a small HTML page. There is some bootstrap stuff in here, not that important. Some design containers you need for bootstrap, and then most important, there is a container with the ID main. And at the bottom, I include jQuery, Semi.js, and my actual client application code, which looks like this. I start up a Semi application here. I can make it a bit bigger. I say the Semi application should be rendered into the container with the ID main. And then in Semi, I can define something that is called routes. So Semi transports the back-end concept of routes with methods to JavaScript, but it's not actually doing any HTTP stuff. You'll see this later on. It's, for small applications, quite nice to work with it. Here I have just a base route, and if I could execute the get method on it, it just renders into the current application a new route application, a new route. And then, if all JavaScript is loaded, I run this application. So, very simple Hello World example, which in the browser looks like this. I just reload. Let's make this a bit smaller. And here it is, astonishing. So the next step is that we want to call an external API. So I have StatusNET installed here on some local Apache instance. What I did in my application is I just make an AJAX request to my personal timeline. You see here it's user timeline / bastian.json. And I just log the responses to console to see if it works. So reload. Oh, not opening a new tab. Reload. So my console, if I go to only AJAX request, you see here is my response. And if I look into it, I have some big JSON with all my status updates I got from StatusNET. So let's display this in a template. Normally my code should have updated. Here it is. So I put my whole AJAX request into an event. I trigger this getFeed event here. This is also a semi.js function, and I bind myself here on this feed handler. It's just because I need this event later on some other places in my code. In here, I still do the same AJAX request, and then I save the response into the current context under the key feed, and then I run the partial function with a template, which then renders into in the current data context the partial feed MS, and should be somewhere here. And my feed template is just iterating over all the feed items, putting all the text, username, created at, and source with some bootstrap classes around it. So if we reload our application, we now see, hey, all the feed items in here rendered with this template. Still, there is some stuff which is not really nice. I hard-coded my user ID here. Fortunately, there's also just a home timeline endpoint at StatusNET that I could use. Which is hometimeline.json. Problem is, if I now reload my application, nothing happens because the home timeline endpoint can only be accessed if I authenticate or authorize myself at the API. And for this, we need authorization. And I have a few slides for that. Authorization at API endpoints is usually done through OAuth. Has anybody used OAuth before? Right? Okay, like maybe cert. Has anybody used OAuth 2 before? Nobody. Cool. So OAuth is a very cool standard, and nearly every API provider supports OAuth. Problem is, it doesn't work very well with JavaScript applications because OAuth relies on cryptography and a shared secret. In JavaScript applications, where should we store a shared secret? Because our code is public, even if you obfuscate it, everybody could just, with a bit of work, read it out, and it wouldn't be a secret anymore. And also doing cryptography in JavaScript is not fun at all. So people came up with, hey, we have to fix it somehow. And the way to fix this is OAuth 2, which is pretty new. I think it's not even published yet, but there are somewhere at draft 28 or something. But the nice thing is it's ready for implementation. It's also only wording details now, and people from Yahoo arguing with people from Microsoft, with people from Google and Facebook, and everybody wants to have their say in it. But in the end, you can implement it, and a whole lot of API providers already implement OAuth 2. Google, Facebook, Twitter is starting with it, I think, as well. And GitHub is doing OAuth 2, and so on. In OAuth 2, there is a user agent profile, which is important for JavaScript applications, and it works like this. Here we have our client application. It's called leonard.com. And here we have a sign in with Twitter button. Now, when I click this button in my JavaScript application, I want to do a JavaScript OAuth 2 user agent flow. For this to happen, first I have to pre-register my application at the API provider. So I get a client ID then, and I have to put this client ID. This can be public somewhere in my code. When I have this client ID, I can then, if the user clicks on this button, open a browser pop-up pointing to an authorization endpoint at the API provider, in this example, Twitter, and add my client ID as a query parameter to it. In this pop-up, the user is then asked to log in, if he's not already logged in at Twitter, and then ask, hey, do you really want to grant the client permissions to use your data? If the user clicks yes, the user is then in this pop-up here redirected to a pre-registered callback site. So when I sign up for a client ID, I also have to provide a callback endpoint. This callback endpoint has to be on the same domain as our client application in order for this flow to work. And Twitter will add the access token, which I later on need to access the API, in the fragment part of the URL. Because the access token is on the fragment part of the URL, it will not be sent to the backend serving this callback page. So the only thing the callback page can do is render out some static JavaScript which analyzes the fragment part, passes out the access token, and sends it through a function call to the opening window, which is possible, only possible because the callback page and our client application are both on the same domain, which is for the user agent profile in OAuth 2 the basic security feature. If somebody redirects the request somewhere, he doesn't get the access token because it's not sent to the backend, and he can't send it to somewhere else because of the cross-origin policy. Then, yeah, it's sent. Then the pop-up can close itself, and some origin policy, and then I can use the access token I have here to make AJAX requests to the API. And at the end, the only thing left to do is storing the access token somewhere. And I could, because I don't want every time the user reloads the page for some reason, I don't want to have him do all this OAuth dance again. I should store it for a certain amount of time. There are several ways to do it. I could store it in a cookie. Downside of a cookie is that the access token would be sent over the wire again with each request, which is maybe not that good because, yeah, if I'm not serving it my page on HTTPS, it can be sniffed. Instead of that, we can also save it just in local storage, so it remains in the client's browser. And I want to demo this now for you as well. By the way, any questions about OAuth 2? If you are scared or don't want to admit it, you can come to me later on. It's no problem. Yeah?
Actually, I don't know if it is actually a question.
Okay.
You said before that to take the response from AJAX, this must be in the same URL.
Yes. If you don't, if the endpoint where you send the AJAX request to does not implement cross-origin resource sharing.
URL means, same URL means the same IP.
The same host,
The
same host name. Not the same IP, the same host name. Because IP, you probably have a big size load balancer as everything, so host name is important. So, demo. So, what I added in my application is now quite much. I added some new routes. So I added a route /login, also with the get method, where I check if I don't have, if I have OAuth parameters, I have access token already in my application, I redirect back to my base login, which loads the feed. Redirect here is not an HTTP redirect, it's just a change of state for semi.js, which is way cool, very cool. If not, I'm just running a login template, which basically has a button on it. Then I have the same login route with the method post. I'll show you in a minute how this is triggered, which opens the window to the authorization endpoint of StatusNET. in my get feed event handler here, that is still triggered here, I check if I have an access token. If not, I redirect to the login page. If I have an access token, I still call the home timeline, but access at my access token as a query parameter to this. That's all that is needed for OAuth 2. And just to show you my login form, my login template with the login button is actually a form with the action @/login and the method post. What Semi.js does is it binds itself to all forms and to all links, and then does not send the form request or the link get request to the server, but executes the corresponding JavaScript function of the root and method I defined. And just to show you my callback page, it doesn't do much. It takes the fragment part, the hash, from the URL where the access token is in it, and calls on the opening window the store access token function and closes the window. And the store access token function parses the access token out of the fragment, because the fragment is access token equals then the access token, and triggers at the application the logged in event, and the logged in event redirects to the main page and then renders the feed. So let's see how it works. I'm now in the browser at /login. Here I can click on connect with StatusNET. A pop-up window opens. I can say allow, and I'm logged in. And if I reload, I get redirected back to my login page and have to do it again. Not very nice. So let's implement local storage. So the only thing I added here is a local storage set item to set the access token into the local storage, and also add the user ID I get back with the access token as well. I need this later on. And I also have a retrieve access token method that I call in my application on startup. And I also have a delete access token method for logout purposes. So let's see if it works. If I reload, I have to log in once again. And now the access token is saved into the browser, into the local storage, until I log out again. So next, let's get some other stuff into our application, which is external. You oftentimes in microblogging services have something like this: a text, cool video with a link, for example, to YouTube, a link to Flickr, a link to TweetPic, and so on. This is okay. The user can click on the link and then watch the video. Much cooler it would be if the user could watch the video directly from the site. And we are lucky. YouTube allows embedding videos in external sites. They have an embed tag, which is actually just an iframe. So what I could do if I would analyze this, I see, okay, for the embed tag, we need this video ID. So I can, if it's a YouTube URL, I can parse it out of the ID out of the URL. Then I have maybe a template with the embed tag, put the video ID in it, and include it into my DOM, and then I'm finished. Great. Problem with that is YouTube may change the embed tag at some point or the URL format. Then we have to adapt our logic. Okay, probably YouTube is not going to do this every day, maybe once a year, and also you maybe notice it at some point, so it may be fine. But it's not only YouTube out there. There's TweetPic, Vimeo, and hundreds of other video and sound and images services, and maybe we want to support more than that. So very, very quickly, the only thing we do is adapting changes in embed tag for embed tags or for link formats, which is not a nice thing to do. There's a standard helping us with that called OEmbed. It's not very well known, actually. Does anybody know it or have heard of it? 4, 5, 6? OEmbed gives you meta information about links for providers supporting OEmbed. And YouTube is one of these. So if you have such a link, you can just query this page. In the header of this page, there should be some links pointing to an OEmbed endpoint, either with XML or JSON format. And if you query, so a bit bigger, it will look like this, youtube.com/OEmbed, and then the URL. And if you query, make a request to this endpoint, you get back an object with some meta information like the title, author name, a URL, thumbnail image, and most importantly, a bit of HTML, which is the YouTube embed tag. It looks a bit crazy because it's encoded, JSON encoded, but it's actually valid HTML I can include into my page. Yeah, here it is. And then I can just take this HTML, put it into my DOM, and have the embed tag. And there are a whole lot of services supporting OEmbed. And of course, to make it even easier to do OEmbed, there's a service called Embedly, which supports 200 OEmbed services providers over one endpoint. So I don't have to have all this looking up OEmbed endpoints request stuff anymore. I can just use Embedly for that. One thing we have to keep in mind is security, because now we are including external content into our page, external HTML. And there may be script tags in that, which could lead to security and cross-site scripting injections. And then people could get the access token from StatusNET, for example. And yeah, not that good. So we should somehow sanitize the stuff we put into our page. And one way to do this is with Caja. I hope I pronounce this correctly. Caja has a JavaScript HTML sanitizer, which works really great. Caja is a project where many Google engineers work on. Therefore, it's not on GitHub, but on Google Code. And yeah, I would totally recommend to use it. So let's demo this. Okay, in my application, I also added now the Embedly library. And all I need to do then hang on. Yeah. I bind myself onto the changed event, which is triggered by SemiJS every time I re-render my application. I look for feed items into my DOM, and then just on this nodes, I call the Embedly function with my Embedly key and everything. And then I have a callback handler where I get back the OEmbed object, and I can then just put it into my DOM somewhere. The rest is not that important. It's just a bit of nicety around it. So if I reload my application, nothing happens. Oh, I added also a form into it. But if I put in a video and send it, you see, here is thumbnail image of the video queried through OEmbed. And if I click on it, I can even watch the video if I want to. But unfortunately, we don't have time for that. So to demo cross-site scripting, I now added a very small OEmbed endpoint myself. So this is just an OEmbed object with some HTML into it. And I created another page called, or another URL here called /widget, and also a root with a get method, where I just make an AJAX request to this JSON file and put the HTML key from the result object into the current context, render the widget partial here, which just displays the HTML without any sanitizing. So just the plain HTML. Let's see. Okay, so here it is. Just a bold foo, very impressive. Now, if I add some script tag to it, you see here, I now have a script tag in it, alerting my current access token. I could also not alert it, but send it somewhere else. We see on reload, the script gets executed. Not very good. So let's add Caja to it, which in the end is just one small function call to the HTML sanitize function provided by the Caja library I just included. Just to show you that I'm not faking this, the script tag is still here. And if I reload my page, the JavaScript tag is stripped out. So, next, real-time updates. So, in our application, we also want to have some desktop-like features, and real-time updates is a feature which is in many desktop applications. You don't have a reload button there, and we don't want this in our application to be necessary as well. So each time something happens in the stream we are displaying here, a new post comes in, we want to notify the user if our application is open. One way to do this is just pinging the API every time, every 10 seconds, every 50 seconds, which then would, pretty quickly we would run into rate limits then, because most API providers say, okay, you can make 1,000 requests, 10,000 requests, 100,000 requests a month for free, but if you need more, you have to pay. Bit bad if you have 1,000 users and query every second, or every 10 seconds, or every 30 seconds. So a publish-subscribe model is much better then. And one way to do this is with pub-sub-hub-up. It works like this. We have this stream, or this feed, and this feed in there is a URL to a hub, or link to a hub serving this feed. This hub here, I can just subscribe at this hub for this feed I got, my personal stream, for example. And then there's a bit of subscription mechanism here, and then every time a user posts something new in the feed, something new comes in, the provider of this feed will post this new entry of the feed to the hub, and the hub will then send this entry to every subscriber. So you get, this is for example the URL of my personal feed. It's just at StatusNET API /statuses/user timeline/user ID.atom. In there, so this is just a content of a feed item. Actually, this standard is called activity streams, which is used by Facebook, Twitter, no, not Twitter, by Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and many more. And in there, there's also a link to a hub. It has the rel attribute hub. And then I can just do this. One problem is that the hub sends this here over HTTP. So we need some HTTP server, or something that is addressable through HTTP, which is not the browser where our application is. So we need some kind of backend. And since this is a JavaScript talk, I wrote this small backend here in Node.js, and transport then the new entry through WebSockets to the client in the browser. I do this with Socket.io. It just falls back to long polls or flash bridges or even just polling, depending on the capabilities the browser has. So very nice framework. And on top of that, I also send out, in the end, WebKit browser notifications so that the user, even if he does not look at the application at the moment, sees that something happened. So to sum it up, we have the client application in our browser. We retrieve this URL of the current user stream with the hub URL. We send an AJAX request to our Node.js backend so that the Node.js backend can subscribe for us at the hub for this feed. There's a small subscription mechanism. And then, if at StatusNET there happens a new post into this feed, the hub sends the new post to our Node.js backend. Through a WebSocket connection, we send the new post to the client application, and then we send a WebKit browser notification to the user. Let's see if this works out. So, first of all, for the demo, because I oftentimes forget that I have to start up my Node backend. And my Node backend is just one WebSocket connections one WebSocket connection here. There's a function which emits the current message to the client, and then an HTTP server to receive the new entry from the hub, which in the end calls this function. The details are not that important. You can revisit it later. And in my application, I then do basically open the WebSocket connection here. And this is just a bit of parsing code, which in the end triggers a render feed event, which renders a new feed with a new entry. So let's see. Oh, I have to go back to my feed. Yeah, everything worked. And here I'm now at StatusNET. And if I say hello DPC through pub sub hub up and send it and go back to my application, it's here. And I don't know why I am in Berlin at the moment. Okay. So let's add notifications to it. Basically, it's just calling the WebKit notifications create notification method. Of course, I should check if WebKit notification is even there. So I just wanted to take it short. And I also have to request the permissions, which I did already somewhere else in my code. So without requesting permissions, you can't send these notifications. And then I just add the avatar, the display name, and text to this WebKit notification. So let's reload it. And hello with notifications. And here it is. So if you're interested in the details, just look at the code later on. And for the last 2 minutes, let's take a small peek how such a JavaScript application may be programmed in 2, maybe 3 years. And some of the projects that came up in the last months is called Meteor. The demo for Meteor I'm showing you is a small Shoutbox demo. It's also available on GitHub and looks like this. What's very nice about Meteor is that you write a JavaScript application and the code is automatically distributed between client and side and server side. So you can have shared code, shared templates, shared models, and everything. I also have to say about Meteor, it's very, very, very alpha. So it's nowhere production ready. There are limitations all the time, but for playing around with it, it's very nice. So in Meteor, what I have here in my package structure, I have 3 folders here. Client is code that only should be pushed to the client. Server is something which should only be at the server. And then I have some shared code, like, for example, defining a model. I'm here defining a Meteor collection for my Shoutbox entries, which is in the end just a MongoDB connection, which is included in Meteor. And then I can use this Shoutbox entry collection in my templates. I defined some handlebars templates here, for example, one for each entry with username, text, and date, one for the whole stream where I iterate over each entry and then execute or render the entry partial. I have also some login and logout and input is basically a small form with a text area or an input tag and a submit button. And the important part in the front end here is then that I have some, just make it a bit bigger, some code which handles event on this templates. For example, in my stream template, I fill the entries with the result of this callback function, which just executes a find on the Shoutbox entry collection and sorts the result by date descending. So this is a MongoDB query, which then gets sent to the Meteor backend automatically, and the result comes back automatically to my front end. I also have here a username that I get out of the session, and here I just submit my form. I say, okay, don't submit it to some server automatically. I then, in my entry collection, insert an object with the username, text, and date, and let's see if it works. So, Meteor. Let me just reload this here. So this is my Meteor application. I log in with Bastian. I say, hello, Meteor. I send it. And here it is in my stream. And if I reload it, it's still there because it was saved automatically to MongoDB with just, I don't know, 5 lines of JavaScript code, 2 templates. It's very impressive if you play around with it. Also, this is mostly client-side JavaScript and 1 line of backend JavaScript. I wanted to do a bit more, so I added also some support, which is a bit more cool. I added my version of Siri called Sarah, and I can ask, what is the population of the Netherlands? Oh my. Okay, I log in, something got broken. So, the joy of live demos. Or something is just slow. At Sarah, what is the biggest state in the US? Yeah, and hopefully if everything works, yeah, Sarah sends me the response to this question. And it's not magic, I just do this with the Wolfram Alpha API. So I didn't program this all myself, just a bit of fun, because I also have in my application here some backend code, some server.js, and what I do here is I execute a query on the collection with a regex, so it should begin with add Sarah. If it begins with add Sarah, I observe on this query, so this query gets executed all the time. Performance-wise, maybe not ideal. And if a new entry was added to this result of this query, I just do a query to the Wolfram Alpha API, pass the response, and put it back with this function here into the collection. And it automatically updates the client then as well through a WebSockets connection. So very cool. And if you want to, in the short break, you can play around with it on this URL, because I uploaded it and bundled it on Meteor, because Meteor has also for testing a small hosting service. So it's meteor-shoutbox-demo.meteor.com. And before you do this, please rate this talk. If you enjoyed it, if you didn't enjoy it, rate this talk on joint.in/6233, or just make a photo of this QR code. It's actually very important for organizers, for speakers, to get feedback on this. And if you didn't like something, or if you like something, please also leave a comment so that I can improve this talk next time I do this, or improve the next talk I do. And of course, I'm always happy about 5-star ratings, but I don't want to influence you. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. This is my Twitter handle here. I'm also available on Google+. This is my email address. Here again, the URL to Speaker Deck. And if you want to know where I'm speaking next, somewhere, if you like this talk, this is my Leonard profile. And yeah, thank you very much.
DPC Radio is a production of iBuildings. The materials presented are copyright of the speakers. This episode is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 2.0 license. iBuildings is a full-service web development company specializing in PHP development. For more information on how we can help you with your next web project, visit our site at ibuildings.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us again for DPC Radio.